My name is Second Lieutenant Tiffany Topper. I'm a Second Lieutenant in the United States Army. Last May of 2010, I commissioned from Xavier University. I'm currently platoon leader in the 447th MP Company, which is a reserve military police unit out of Columbus.
And why did you join the service?
As far as I can remember, I've always wanted to be a military officer. In fact, I was actually born in Germany because my father was a military officer. So I definitely grew up with that strong sense of duty calls and just being a good patriot. So my whole life, it's all I've ever wanted to do.
What were your experiences in officers training?
There's a couple different ways you can become an officer. It's not compared to the number of, enlisted soldiers, officers are a very much smaller group. The route I took is I did Army ROTC all 4 years through college, and then I commissioned once I got my college degree.
How do you feel the locals feel about American involvement in their nation? That's bad on. I don't know.
Well, I studied political science, so I'm very much interested in the workings with civilians, with the military, and I think it really, really depends on the sector. I know I've had a lot of friends that have deployed and come back, and they just said the cultures and the values are a lot different. And this, even from Iraq to Afghanistan, etc., it's just so different that I think that it really depends on the individual, and it depends also on the soldier themselves, how receptive they are to learning a new culture, a new environment. Also what your job is. Some jobs you're definitely, if you're, example, like an infantryman and you're doing room clearing, or even a military police like I am, and you're doing building clearing and room clearing, you're more likely to see conflict. You may have more negative spin on the environment, or even the unit I was with, they just got back from deployment, and they did detention ops. So they basically ran a military prison, if you will, and they, compared to you hear a lot about how Americans are mistreating soldiers. They said now the way it is really the soldiers are very kind of locked down on what they can do. There's a lot of things that go on in terms of the prisoners taunting and things like that. They just can't stop it. So the soldiers I work with now don't really appreciate the culture, I guess, and it really just depends. But I think that that's definitely a big part of winning this war, if we're ever going to win it, or even what that means anymore, is definitely realizing that American values are a lot different than those in the Middle East, and that we need to find a way to not force our values on them. And I definitely think that that's going to be a tough battle. I think that for me personally, I'm not fear for my own safety, and I don't know if that's just being young and dumb. I did have a friend who was killed last summer in action. And almost all my best friends are in the military, and they're all over the world. And I have some who are deployed right now, and so I worry about them because again, his name was First Lieutenant Michael Runyon. He was his first 2 weeks in Iraq, which Iraq is no longer considered a combat zone. So if you go, you're not going to get a combat patch. So he was doing a patrol, and they were looking for IEDs, and he was killed in action. So I definitely worry about my friends, but so much myself, and again, I don't know if that's just being young and dumb and thinking you're invincible. So I'm not worried about myself, but again, I have my best friend just deployed, and then, a couple more are all on the books to go. So it's definitely a very real reality whenever I get a text and someone's like, oh, have you heard? The first thing that goes to your mind is has someone been killed? So it's definitely something that's very real, but is it enough where I would not want to go myself? No. Is it enough that I want to convince my friends not to go? No. It's what we trained for. You're just as likely to get killed in a training accident as you are in combat, but it's definitely a dangerous job, but it kind of goes hand in hand. We all signed up to do it.
When did you know that you wanted to join the Army?
For me, as far as I can remember.
Yeah.
I originally actually wanted to be in the Air Force all through high school. I wanted to get the Air Force Academy. So the military has always been something I wanted to do. Maybe not Army per se, but I'm definitely glad I chose Army.
You said briefly you originally wanted to go to the Air Force, then switched to the Army. What made you want the Army more?
Well, what happened with me is that, I only really applied to the Air Force Academy, and then I applied to because when I was a senior, I did post-secondary, so I took classes at Xavier as a senior. So I took my AP classes in the morning, and then the afternoon, and I went to Xavier. So my dad, he also went to Xavier and did Army ROTC. He's like, well, let's just check out the facility. The building that it's kind of housed in is called St. Barb's. And he's like, let's go to St. Barb's and just see, what the Army has to say, so you have a backup plan. And basically, my senior year, by October, I knew I had a 4-year ride to Xavier. And that's through Army ROTC. And also, I was taking classes there. So I made friends and kind of like did clubs and went to some college parties. So I had some friends. And then at the same time, I was applying to the Air Force Academy, and that's a really long application process. You first have to get nominated by a senator or a congressperson. I did that, and then go through all your applications, and it was kind of a nightmare. But I ended up getting accepted to the Air Force Academy. But by then, I'd already had like so many friends at Xavier, and like I said, kind of hung out down there and made some friends and already classes. And I learned more about the Army, and I just ended up going the more traditional route. The reason I like the Army versus the Air Force now as an officer is it really depends. Like, this isn't a fair statement probably, but more, and I'm getting this from other friends I had who went through Air Force schooling. They're now an Air Force second lieutenant. Is that the Air Force, like, if you want to fly, which is what I wanted to do, because I worked on my pilot's license when I was in high school. So my thing is I wanted to fly jets. Is that as an officer, you fly, and you're kind of just in charge of, like, you and your aircraft. Like, that's, it's kind of very cutthroat in terms of, like, competing with other lieutenants. And then you get to a certain point in your career where you don't fly anymore. You're like commander, so you command other pilots. And what I like about the Army is that I'm in charge of soldiers. Like, that's what I want to do. Like, as cool as it would have been to fly jets, it would have just been me in a jet. But now, like, I'm directly in charge of the lives. And I don't like to use the word in charge of, but I'd say responsible for the lives and the training of 40 other soldiers. And that's what I like to do. Like, I'd rather my job be making sure they're set up for success and making sure they're taken care of and they have everything they need, rather than just me competing with lieutenants to get a cool, like, jet. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of like I really like about the Army is I like taking care of soldiers.